I didn't know it did that.
Okay, there we go. We're live now. Perfect. Which is probably good to, we can kind of start explaining as people jump on how we did the blind setup. But yeah, everybody all set for, although I put 1, 2, 3. So yeah. I went over to the distillery next door.
Yeah.
That's
I got ABC, but
yeah, mine is essentially just 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Okay. That works. And is I went to the distillery next door. I'm like, hey, I need you to read something off my phone, put it into these sample bottles, and then delete it from my phone. And then I need you to jump on the live stream to verify that
that you're doing the right ones.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, okay. Yeah, I think people start to join in, and then I have the Bourboner Friday email going out at 1:05 that
okay.
That will I think bring some people in as well. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll do like a brief pause, so then that way I can cut it and splice it on YouTube, and we'll be all set. So
okay.
Welcome, everyone. I am Blake from Bourboner and Seelbach. We're here doing another Bourboner / Seelbach private barrel pick. Today, we are going to be selecting a Pinhook Bourbon pick. And so we're joined with Master Taster Sean Josephs, as well as Dee Jones, who works with us at Seelbach. And you probably remember her from the New Riff pick. So thanks for joining me. Yeah. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, Sean, if you want to go ahead and just kind of introduce yourself and the brand, and everybody tuning in and watching this it's like I always get the comment of, oh, just jump straight into the tasting notes, but go ahead and introduce yourself and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, my name's Sean Josephs. I founded Pinhook in 2010, and kind of the basic idea of Pinhook, which does kind of tie into how we do our barrel picks, was my background was in the wine industry. And so I was really interested in the idea of having, taking a wine approach to bourbon, which doesn't mean aging bourbon in wine barrels. It means looking at each vintage as an opportunity to create a unique and delicious whiskey, not replicate a flavor profile at an established proof. So I think we all know from cask strength to, like antique collection type releases, people have kind of dabbled in vintages before, but what we do is really this comprehensive approach to creating an annual vintage, even down to our what I would call our everyday bourbon and rye. And so the way that kind of applies to our single barrels is we don't actually release single barrels as Pinhook. We only do picks, because Blake and I were chatting about this before. I don't like the idea of our single barrels competing with picks and sort of setting the tone for Pinhook single barrels are supposed to taste like this. And then when people pick them, they're looking for something else. I kind of like the idea that they're all something else, right? There is no, and I think we all know, for example, if you look at something everyone knows like Blanton's is obviously a single barrel, but they're trying, even with every pick, or sorry, not with every pick, but every Blanton's that's released that's not a single pick is meant to be stylistically kind of similar. And so I kind of like the idea that there is no style. And so what we're tasting, I've obviously vetted these barrels, and I tried to make it interesting for everybody today by putting in 3 of my favorites. There shouldn't be any dogs in the bunch. But when people are in picking mode, besides the fact that I think that they've been presented with barrels that I think would all make a good single barrel, which to me means like balance and harmony, great long finish, good aromatics. That's kind of what I'm looking for in the barrels. But stylistically, the barrels could be wildly different from each other. And that's kind of half the fun. And also to just point out, we call our single barrel program True Single Barrel. And what that means to me is what we're tasting is what you're going to get in the bottle. We're at cask strength, unfiltered. So there's no, and then it gets proofed down to 90 or 110 or 105. So, yeah.
Interesting.
sensor
And
is
so,
going crazy.
as D gets, I made this joke last time, but I'll do it again. You know, at Seelbach, we have to save any way we can. So she got like the 30-second timer on the light.
Yeah, it's sort of like I'm not
We can
moving
extend
around
that.
enough for that.
Yeah. So if you start getting really animated, we'll know you're just trying to keep the.
I'm just trying to keep the light
from.
on.
Yeah.
I will say too, though, similar to Blake. So this time when I did my single barrels, I do it differently. I was like giving them grades like a teacher, but it kind of makes sense to me to think that there is. It's so. I mean, it's like it's hard to say this is an A plus, this is an A, this is an A minus, but I don't know how else to think about it. If I think that a barrel blows me away, it's an A plus. If I'm like, wow, that's really damn good, that's an A, and I'm like, you know, it's quite good, then it's like an A minus, B plus, etc. So what I think is really fun is we're doing these blind because I had these ranked in an order. I didn't have them all in. So I had these ranked as like, I think one of these is an A, an A minus, and a B plus. So I was keeping these all in my kind of like top range. But as you guys know, tasting a lot, it could be what you had for dinner the night before. It could be the weather. It could be your mood. And I know Blake had kind of tasted these and you had your favorites or your favorite, but I think it'll be fun to taste them blind and, you know, see
if that favorite is the same.
And see if my order's the same. Maybe I would guess and they'd be completely out of order. I have no idea. So
and just to explain for everyone watching along, what we did is we had somebody at Seelbach basically just assign a ABC to the 3 different barrels we're selecting, and then somebody else, that person then sent the list to somebody else, and then myself, Dee, and Sean had that person pour the samples for us. So we all have the same ABC or 1, 2, 3. We just don't know which barrel is barrel. I got them here: 234, 2312, and 2283. So I already know what was my favorite after trying them. D, you get to go in completely blind, which I think is a good kind of added value because, you know, I already have my bias in my head. And so I'm trying to like stop myself from thinking, oh, I'm just trying to find that favorite. And I know Sean's thinking, oh, I want to make sure I give an A plus to the
A plus,
the
same one, exactly.
The A plus. But, you know, like you said, it is interesting. And I know you taste multiple times on each barrel, but how one night you can try something and then you try it a week later and it's like, that tastes different. And I don't know what that is. Maybe it's what you ate before, or, you know, if you had coffee in the morning, if you didn't have coffee in the morning, there's all kinds of interesting factors. So, well, with that, let's go ahead and jump into it's either 1 or A, depending on how you have it. And so, Sean, question for you: all MGP?
Yeah. So this is all of these. If I'm not mistaken, it's hard for me to say without the bottle, like the sample bottles in front of me. But I think they had their birthday on June 26th, so they turned 5 years old on June 26th.
Yeah, well, they're 15 F26. So so F is 15
is the year. F is the 6th letter of the alphabet, therefore the 6th month of the year, and then 26 is the day of the month. So that's how they code them.
Oh.
So
that's all those codes, and when it breaks down, it's breaking down in numbers. I didn't know that. Okay.
So these like hieroglyphics or something.
Yeah.
So this is the MGP 75% corn, 20.5% rye, 4.5% malted barley. So it's still considered high rye, but not high rye in the 35% rye arena.
It's high rye, not extremely high rye.
So can you guys break down MGP, like what that means? Because I know there's people who have no clue what that means.
So what is the actual Midwest grain
products? Sexiest name out there, Midwest grain products.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's just the Indiana distillery, and man, they've been doing it for a while. They've were initially distilling, and then they combined with LDI back in probably 15-ish. Oh, may have been earlier than that. Anyways, but big distillery in Indiana, produce a lot of bourbon. have slowly started releasing some of their own stuff, but mainly just produced for other brands and other distilleries.
They're
And
come back.
Oh,
Sorry,
is
I
the
have
light
to
coming
actually
back?
turn it on this time. Sometimes
Okay,
it pops back on, sometimes it doesn't.
Sean, just, we've talked with some other brands that, they work with MGP or a bunch of other distilleries. How has that changed in availability in barrels, and does that affect what you're doing today? And, are you still able to get what you need from them?
It's a great question. So we started with MGP when they were LDI, so Lawrenceburg Distillers Incorporated, before they were purchased. And we started in 2011. We bought 20 barrels. So the going rate, we paid $465 a barrel for 3-year-old bourbon. Back then, at the time, it was super available. So, they were like, and I do want to pause for a moment to mention this, because the idea of MGP or LDI for people who are enthusiasts has just become this, well, of course, right? I owned a bourbon bar, and I was constantly surrounded by American whiskey. I had never heard of them. So I think the bourbon industry at that point hadn't really caught fire. And people
it's a new, yeah. It was almost even like really within the last 3 to 4 years, don't you think?
Yeah. I think for me, it was like 2012 is when things really started to explode. So MGP wasn't common knowledge. And so it actually took me a while to find them, which sounds weird now. But then when you could get them on the phone, they're kind of like, you want 20 barrels? You want 2,000 barrels? You want 20,000 barrels? They had plenty of supply. Then, I don't know if everyone remembers, but there was a period where there was an actual barrel shortage. There was like a period of time where there's like not very good harvest in the Ozarks with white oak. And so then it kind of dried up. And I actually remember we were calling MGP to put in another one of our puny orders of like, we would like 20 more barrels, please. And I remember the salesman saying like, hey, we're down to 4,000 barrels. We're talking about aged product. And I would buy as much as you can, which sounded like the most BS sales move ever. Like, you better get it now. But lo and behold, it was gone. And so obviously they could keep making distillate, but they didn't have any barrels to put it in. And then also because of the bourbon boom and because of all the other non-distiller producers, all the juice got run through. And then so there wasn't any more availability of MGP. So we were kind of sitting dead in the water for a minute. And now, as some people might know, we actually have a contract in custom distillation with the former Old Taylor Distillery, which is now called Castle and Key. So while we have this vertical series that we're putting out with the MGP barrels that we have left, we've kind of shifted to our contract now. So we're not actually in the business right now of buying more barrels from MGP. You're
just constantly laying up more each year.
Yeah, of Castle and Key. Exactly. So we're sitting.
Nice.
And so I think I should mention too, Blake, because it's part of the exciting thing about this barrel pick, is that the vertical series that I mentioned is going to have a parallel vertical series of single barrels. So vertical series that we blend is me putting together 150 barrels each year as the whiskey gets 1 year older over the next 9 years, finishing with a 12-year-old bourbon in 2027. But there's going to be single barrels running parallel, which actually I don't think to this moment we've quote unquote made public, not because it's a secret. There just hasn't been an opportunity to talk about it. So so Blake and the team there has the right of first refusal to pick a vertical single barrel every year until it's 12. So unless for some reason that I don't understand, Blake is like, nah, we're good. We don't want to do this anymore.
Dee, if I ever say that, you officially take over and be like, yes.
I was getting ready to say, you don't have to worry about it, Sean. You will hear.
So this single barrel will be bottled as Bourbon War, because that's the horse connected to our vertical series. Bourbon War vertical 5-year-old single barrel at cask strength. And then next year, Blake and then you guys will pick from a 6-year, a 7-year, all the way up to a 12-year. Right. I want to say, don't hold me to it because it's like, I don't know the exact numbers. I think it's 50 of these for the country for bourbon. right?
Wow.
So,
Awesome.
and in each case, the account has the right of first refusal. So really, it's only 50. It's only, unless someone backs out or changes their mind, it's only 50 stores that will be in the entire country that will have this product over the next, 8-9 years.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and it's really the exciting part to me about this program is to think that you're kind of coming back each year and you see how it progresses out as it gets older. So that's, I mean, I think an incredible way to do a barrel program. Gives everybody something to be excited about, and as a customer, it's like collectible. It's the bourbon world. We like things to be collectible and to be limited. So it's all that good stuff.
Collectible.
Well, let's jump into number one. I mean, for me, and now it's like, oh, yep, this was definitely my favorite. But then I smelled the other two. I'm like, those are pretty close too. So, I'm just getting a lot of. There's the caramel, the spice.
I get a lot of spice. I even get a little bit of toasted coffee bean.
Can you guys?
See, and I love those. Yep.
Can you humor me on one thing?
Mm-hmm.
Just because this is the way that I like to try to approach it. It can't just be about the nose, right? Mm-hmm. However, I always like to start by figuring out which nose is the best. So can we go through A, B, and C and see if everyone has a favorite just on nose? And it doesn't mean it's going to end up being the favorite, and then kind of compare the noses to each other and see.
This one's very different.
Yeah, so I initially like 1 and 3. Nose is the best, and I am kind of leaning towards 3 because I nose through them a little bit. And I don't know that I pick up specifically which different notes that I'm liking or not liking, but to me, 2 smells a little bit. And it sounds like a weird word for nosing, but a little bit thin. It's a little bit higher. I'm getting not quite as much depth there with 3. Mm-hmm. It seems much more rounded, more like ripened fruit, like cherries and, almost more dried apricot, that kind of stuff.
That's what I'm getting from number 1.
Yeah, and that's where I thought 1 and 3 in my mind were very close. And then whenever I went to 3, when I put 1 and 3 side by side, I felt like I just got more of it in 3 than I did 1. But they're actually pretty similar noses. What do you think, Dee?
Let me make sure my levels are the same.
You're not going backwards.
That's what makes sure my levels are the same because for me, I get the same from 1 and 3, but I smell it more in 1 than I do 3.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit more. I get heavier nose of the fruits you were talking about, the dark cherries. I get a little hint of roasted coffee bean that I like. I love that in some whiskeys. But I definitely get the spice.
Yeah, it's got good spice. And 2 isn't bad. Don't get me wrong. It just.
But I get what you mean in terms of it being a bit thin.
Yeah.
It's very light.
Sean, did we pass the test?
No, actually, I don't think it is a test. What I find interesting, I agree with you guys across the board in terms of what you're getting, and then the next question is what do you like? So 1 and 3,
which is interesting. Did you like 2 more than we were discussing?
Yeah. So what I like about 2, so 1 and 3 definitely pop more out of the glass to me, right?
The more 2 sits, though, the more I'm getting from it.
They're brighter. I think they have a tiny bit more ethyl too. Like there's a little bit more burn on the nose. What I kind of find intriguing about 2 is it's really soft on the nose, right? So which not disagreeing with your sort of the way you framed it, but I guess what you'd call thin, I'd call soft. And there's something kind of inviting about it because it's not kind of leaping out of the glass in the same way. So I think that they're all have cool noses. And then it's just kind of like, And then that's why I think it'll be interesting to think about the overall experience, because if 2 is kind of soft on the nose but ends up being more intense than the other 2 on the palate, that's kind of an interesting whiskey journey. Versus what if one of the other ones is like sharper on the nose but then isn't quite as intense on the palate? And so it's kind of like what's the kind of 360-degree on it. I guess the other thing that always intrigues me is B to me is the least hot, and I think it's interesting. You don't know what the proofs are.
Mm-hmm.
You dump, but I find it kind of interesting that, let's say in theory they're roughly around the same proof, just how differently they hit, even if the proofs are similar, is kind of cool. So.
Yeah, I did that with a couple of our recent picks, and very similar in proof, but in almost identical in age. But you felt it so much more on one versus the other. And what is that even? I mean, is that, there's just, because I mean, the alcohol is the alcohol. There's nothing you can, is it just what makes up that other? Say it's 100 proof. So what makes up that other percent? So there's more, I don't know, congeners or something.
That I was going to say,
kind of soften it up.
Yeah. I mean, I think you bring up a great point. I've never taken like the science approach. Like I have a background in wine and working in restaurants. And so I'm kind of looking at it more flavors and aromas. And I was always like a horrible science student. So I've never really dug into that. But from an experience standpoint, what you're talking about is somehow, even if the alcohol were the same, what you're saying, like the congeners, the esters, just the way the fruit comes across, it can mask the alcohol or make the alcohol seem less apparent. And same thing on the palate. There's some 128 proof cask strength bourbons they're obviously huge whiskeys, but when they hit your palate, it gives the impression of softness, impression of a lack of heat, even though there's a ton of alcohol. And so whatever that kind of magic and alchemy is, I just find super fascinating.
Yeah. Which I guess to tie it into one of our other favorite subjects of cooking, where if something is way too spicy and you throw a bunch of butter on it or a bunch of fat, you didn't pull out cayenne pepper, but it does kind of soften it a little bit. So
mellow it out.
Something that
my favorite example in cooking, like you're talking about, is if you over salt something, you can create the impression of less salt with both acid and sugar.
Yeah.
Right. But it's still,
you didn't pull it.
You're still gonna wake up at 3 a.m. and need to like guzzle 2 glasses of water. But the way it hits your palate doesn't seem salty, but you haven't lessened the amount of salt. You've just created the impression of less salt by balancing it with other things. And so that's what gets back to kind of my point. I think the best barrels and also the best blends have just managed to balance all the elements of the whiskey,
So I've started tasting through a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I've tasted 1 and 2. And man, 2 just does hit that really nice, soft. This is going to be interesting because I thought the nose was going to. It is. I'll say it is softer on the nose, but then you hit the palate. It's full. It's good body structure and a lot of caramel. Are you trying
a lot of caramel? Yeah, not what I was expecting.
No,
I didn't know what to expect. Really, I try not to have too many expectations, but
what I just found, I haven't tasted C or 3 yet, but I just tasted A and B. A has like a little bit of a hole in it to me in the middle of the palate. Mm-hmm. I really think of whiskey like that too. It's like it's a texture thing, and it's also like where you think about you're getting these flavors, but is it hitting like front, middle, back, and is it really like all encompassing? I feel like A reminds me a little bit when I would think of wine this some way. Somehow it's like a little bit of a donut. Like there's just a hole, and it's like I think it's delicious. But then when you compare it to B, I feel like B is like really wrapping my entire palate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just coats it. It seems a little more viscous, and yeah, which this is it's interesting to do these barrel picks But then, you know, at the end of the day, the person getting the bottles and drinking them, they don't have, you know, they're not comparing it side by side by
Three
side.
different barrels. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to think like if they, you know, if I drink any of these on their own, I'd say, oh wow, that's really good. You know,
It's
Sean
good
sent me a good
exactly.
barrel. But then when you're putting them side by side, it's like, oh, there's a little more pressure. Okay, I got it.
But that's the great thing about doing the side by side tastings is because you get those nuances between the three.
The other thing I think is interesting, because I taste a lot of MGP, is like I think about like like going to 3 or C. On the nose, that one's hitting me as much more like kind of clovey. It's like it feels like a spice driven.
Yeah, I just took a sip of
and 3. B or 2 to me is kind of like a fruit driven barrel. You know what I mean? Like they all have butterscotch and have other components. And then I feel like, let me come back to that for a sec.
3 is a lot of spice.
Yeah, and it's almost like that. It reminds me of as a kid, we'd toast a piece of bread and put like the cheap parquet butter on it and just throw cinnamon and sugar on there. And you'd have like, you get the random bite where it's just dry cinnamon powder. And that's a lot of what I get. Like there is some of that sweetness, but it has that a little bit of that dry character on the back end that.
Yeah.
Are we talking about 3 right now?
3. Yeah.
I gave up on that light. I'll be getting up every 5 seconds. I give up.
I'm just gonna. Although the best was the last time it went off, I felt like you just like looked at it and it turned back on.
And it turns on, but then it's like it'll wait 2 seconds and turn right back off. So I'm like, okay,
it's got a mind of its own.
I'm just gonna have my flashlight as my backup.
You know,
we're gonna make it work. Thank you.
I think even though it's not like maybe the way people think about barrel picks, because I'm so used to tasting for blending, I tend to break them into blocks because I have to think about blending blocks, right? Like what's the dominant character of a barrel? And so I think this is actually an amazing lineup because I see A as more wood dominant, B is more fruit dominant, and C is more spice dominant. Yeah. Like all have other components, right? Like they all have wood, spice, sweet, or like butterscotch, toffee, brown sugar. Like they all have all of that. But there's one thing that's kind of leading the profile, at least to my palate. And so if I'm working with these barrels, like working on a little blend, I would kind of be like, oh, these would be kind of fun together because they all hit a different, and like cooking, it's like you can build the flavors off of each other.
That's a good question I'd like to ask. So when you are thinking about it, is that what you're looking for? You say, all right, this one's dominant in wood. I know I can use this to give it backbone and hit some of the oakier notes, and this one's fruit. So that'll bring, or what does that process even look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of that and a little bit of also the fact that there's certain things that you honestly can't taste that then react with another barrel, which I would call like, in wine, we used to call it the risk of epiphany. You know, like you might have this amazing epiphany. You kind of have an idea of why you're putting these barrels together, but they might end up becoming something that is far beyond anything you could imagine. Sometimes when we do the blending, I'll be surprised that like one version of a blend will seem more citrus forward and youthful in some ways and fruit forward. And then another version could be more like leather, tobacco, and darker, but all the barrels are the same age. The blend even shares barrels in common. And so it's really how that there's a certain magic to it. So I guess, Blake, to answer your question more succinctly, I think about what barrels make sense to put together. And I'm like, if I have this really leathery, earthy tobacco barrel and I put it with this super caramel barrel and this super cinnamon barrel and this really kind of almost woody cedar barrel, that sounds like a bunch of things that'll work well together. But then the way they come together can often be surprising and unexpected, you know? So it's just like creating a framework.
Interesting. And so I'm just going back through now. I put just a little bit of water, probably 4 or 5 drops into each, let them sit for a minute. And coming back, the nose of one is still good, but man, the palate it's just more oak forward and a little drier. I don't want to use the word thin again. I feel like I already applied that. But then going with a little bit of water to 2, I feel like it opened up really nice on the nose.
It did. 2 became my favorite with some water.
It's coming out and just, man, it coats the palate, is thick. It just really tasty.
And I was going to say, I like the mouthfeel of 2 better.
And I think that's a good point, because I think texture is kind of overlooked, to be honest. Like people, it's like
I definitely pay attention to texture.
Big part of the experience.
Sure.
I'll be fascinated because whenever we decide we do our reveal, because I would like to think I would put them in order of the first to last BCA. That's how I would do it. And it would be interesting. I have no idea. It could be the same order I had them or totally backwards, but I guess I also don't get too bogged down in that. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. Just what I'm tasting right now.
And I'll put this over to you, Dee. Favorite so far?
So my favorite is B. But I think I like A over C. I think I like more of the oak forward versus the spice forward between these 2.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes it 3 for 3 on B. There's just something about B that is
especially with a little bit of, once it's aerated a little bit and then you added a little water, it just opened up completely differently than I expected it to.
And granted, going back to the noses, I still stick with my first statement. I don't like the B nose the best. I still think it's good, but man,
A on the nose is still better for me. But in terms of overall, B is the winner.
That B is fantastic. So I think that makes it unanimous. We can call B the winner. And then, but if I had to guess, I think B is 2340 because that was my favorite when I tasted them initially.
My barrel bottles.
And I'm trying to look. I don't remember my notes enough. I think 2312 may be A, and then 2283 is C.
Okay. So you think 2283 might be C?
2340. I don't know, Sean. Do you have guesses on what the actual?
I didn't do it because I just graded them. So I didn't do it by barrel number. I didn't have it. But let me see.
Did we pick the A+ barrel, or do we need?
That's
to change
what I want to know. Is what we picked, what you considered A+.
B is 23. Okay, so this is a good. I had originally. So 2283 is A. Right?
Okay.
Is that right?
20. Or hold on. Let me.
Let me say I don't know what the order.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, 22. Okay, so 2283 is A, 2340 is B. So that stayed as the favorite.
So you guessed right. Okay.
And then 2312. So I had those backwards.
So I flip-flopped as well compared to my notes. So I had C as my top pick. When I did it. But, I would also say keep in mind, and I like to be totally transparent about this, unless someone claims to have this magical palate, I might have been doing 15 in a day. And even though I do them in sets, I don't care how much water you drink I think this is the better way to do it. I think the best way to do barrel picks would be this is your day and you're done. Yeah. But when I'm identifying barrels for the program, just to be efficient. And
I was going to say that would take 4 years for you to get through 1 month of sales for Pinhooks.
Exactly.
I guess where I'll give myself some sort of pat on the back is I think they're all really good. And so at least they are good barrels. But so I actually had C as my A+ barrel, B, which is our favorite, I had as my A- barrel, and A was my B+ barrel. So I guess I was still in the same in saying that I put A third, but I flip-flopped B and C. But again, you could also argue I mean,
even tasting those side by side, those profiles are really tight. They're very similar. For me, I think they're all three really good picks, but there's just something about that B that I thought was just stood out, and I think gives some people a little something different and a little more enjoyment, because we're all drinking this, and Sean and I, we talked about this, of like people like, oh, I want something that just punches me in the gut, and it's like, well, I mean, yeah, okay, like let's get some heat, but let's get some heat with flavor and some spice, with something to back it up and be rounded,
something with some character. Yeah,
I think to your point, and I think it's good to be transparent too about the fact that there are a lot of people with MGP. There are a lot of other NDPs releasing MGP. Sorry, I'm going like on an acronym. There are a lot of other
NDPs releasing MGP ASAP,
and their SOP. But I think that C and A maybe fall more into what someone would expect, with a little bit more of like the spice and especially at cast strength. And I think that B is a little bit more of a surprise. It's got great texture. It's very fruit forward, but then it's got a lot of other things going on beneath it. And it's soft on the nose and it's kind of soft on the palate, but then it's still, I think, a dynamic whiskey. And so it's something a little different, even from this world of MGP, that someone can say like, oh, this is a really fun bottle that doesn't remind me of some of other MGP picks that I've had. So
I think that's the fun part, is like, MGP is so big, they have a pretty wide variety of tastes. So if you want something that tastes exactly like, what another producer is using with MGP, go buy that. But, I prefer something that's unique and kind of fits what the profile that we prefer at Seelbach. So
it's cool. Just tasting again, like the last little bits, I can almost see why C or 3 kind of jumped out at me when I would have been doing this, because it's also like, I don't know, Blake, I have had friends that compete in like barbecue competitions like Memphis.
Oh, yeah. Memphis and May. Yeah.
And the way you compete is you just dial up everything. You dial up the smoke, you dial up the sweet, you take the volume and you're just like ribs to the, level, turn it up to 11, because that the judges are going from table to table. And if your dish or your ribs, your brisket is going to pop, it's got to cut through.
Yeah, you got one bite to
make someone be like, whoa. And sometimes the way you do that is to just go like ballistic,
punch them in the face with it.
And I can see where B, even though I gave B an A-, it wasn't like but that in the context of tasting 10 or 15 samples in a row, that softness might have gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit. But I love it.
Well, cool. Well, that brings us to about the 40-minute mark. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But Sean, thanks for joining us. Dee, thank you again. I know it's hard to convince people to drink bourbon on a Friday afternoon, but glad you. And what's our timeline? Just, it's fall release on these barrels, right?
Yeah. I don't. You know what?
So they're currently still in the barrel.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yes, correct. So yeah, I don't want to give you bad information, but I will text you or email you quickly thereafter, because it's something I can confirm with Kate, because we do have our single barrel bottling schedule all laid out for the year.
I think she told me September, October, but I also don't want to get a ton of emails in September and October if I don't have the bottle yet.
We'll get.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get the real info. So, all right. Thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Great to meet you.
We know. You don't know proof.
We don't know
yet,
the proof. Okay.
No, I'd say they've been averaging 114 to 116, but then you'll see some 117s, but you'll see the occasional 111 as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I find it fascinating when you dump the barrels too, because the average yield has been about 35 6-packs or 210 bottles. But then you'll definitely get some 39 6-pack ones and some 27 6-pack one. So sometimes, a lot of times, some of my favorites end up being light barrels. And I think the reason is, for whatever reason, because there was a leak or whatever the case might be, you have more oxygen. And I'd be curious if B might be a little lighter because the oxygen tends to promote a lot of fruit development. Or barrels that are close to the window would be the other option because you're getting that air cycle, which gives you oxygen as well. So
yeah, environment makes such a difference. It's such subtle differences. I love that. Can I ask one more question? Do we have time for me to ask one more question? How
we got all the time.
Yeah, we could do this all day.
I just had this question. Yeah. So how do you, when you're pulling a spirit out of the barrel, how do you know the ABV? Like, how do you measure that?
So they literally have, it looks like this awesome little gun, and they're just like, stick it in, and it just immediately digitally gives the proof. But
got it. Okay.
And this
every distillery tour I've been on, no one has shown me how they actually determine ABV.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why. It's one detail I forget to ask.
Even after that, they have like I know the distilleries here, they have like a $50,000 machine that they run it through because it has to be in whatever, it's like a 0.3%. So like they have the gun for kind of the fun, and then to pay the taxes, it's like this.
Correct.
Usually like the third most expensive piece of equipment at a distillery sometimes is I forget what they call it, but it's like they basically put it in a ring, they put it in, and the machine tells exactly the breakdown because that's how they pay the tax, and they put it on the bottle. And
The other thing too, Dee, which I don't really, more of that pesky science business that I don't understand, but you can't get an accurate proof from a sample. I don't know why. After the barrel. So that's why we don't put proofs on them. And we actually got burned on that with a blend where they had like proofed the blend, but based off of samples. Like, so we'd done the blend.
Oh, got it.
So it had the portions of all the barrels, and we proofed it. But then when they actually dumped it, it was significant.
A completely different proof.
Yeah, which
wow.
was the problem. So again, I don't know the science behind it, but
that's interesting.
We leave it.
Actually, I do remember. I do have to go. I have to go. Let the babysitter go. So
got it. Okay. Yeah.
So I forgot.
Disney and all the things.
No, but hey, y'all stay here and talk and enjoy. But no, thanks again, and y'all have a good rest of your weekend.
It was great meeting you, Sean.
Likewise, that was so much fun.
Yeah. Okay. So next time, guys.
Next time.